So you mentioned, and I really wanted to come onto this Rent Reform Act and Renters Reform Act, I think is the correct terminology. And it's, I mean, gosh, I've read some bits on it, and, you know, like a lot of legislation and jargon, there's quite a lot of confusing bits about it. I know you've been doing some extra podcasts as well with any kind of, you know, any kind of changes that are afoot, which is been really, really useful. But can you kind of give, you know, for those of us that are this is another thing that seems to be like the nail in the coffin to sell all of your buy-to-lets. You know, you must not buy any, you must not go into buy-to-lets because this is happening. You'll never be able to get your tenants out. What is it that bad?
No, it's not. Honestly, there's been just so much polarized views, and because you've got the landlord lobby that are trying to make the renters reform bill more landlord friendly, and then you've got the tenant lobby that are trying to make it more tenant friendly. And the intention of the bill is to rebalance the relationship between landlords and tenants so that tenants have more security. They don't have the sword of Damocles over their head worrying about being served with a Section 1 no fault eviction notice. And the feeling is that the reforms that were started in the 1980s and ended in the 1990s were to put the balance too much in favor of landlords. And so what's going to happen at the moment? You have what's called an assured short hold tenancy, and what that means is that you can after 6 months, you can serve a Section 21 notice, or you can serve it at 4 months, 2 months notice to expire anytime after the 6th month when you're outside of a fixed term, and you can get possession of your property and you don't have to give a reason. So if you don't like them, say they've been shouting at the neighbours and or they're a little bit late on rent arrears, you can just terminate. And also you can have this fixed term, so it can be for six months or 12 months or 2 years or whatever you like. And then after the fixed term, it'll either go into another fixed term, will become periodic, which means rolling on a monthly basis. So that's been the way, the default tenancy that we've had since 1997, this assured short hold tenancy. And what the Act's going to do, it's abolishing a short hold tenancies, and instead there's going to be an assured tenancy. And what that is, there's a lot of jargon. What that means is all of the tenancies are going to be these rolling periodic contracts. And so they will sign up, tenants will sign up for an indefinite period with the landlord. And the landlord won't be able to use a no-fault eviction notice after the rules come into effect. And they will only be able to get possession of their property by using a different process, which is called Section 8. And what that is the landlord has to have grounds. And there are two types of grounds. There are mandatory grounds, which means that the judge has to order possession if the landlord can prove that a ground applies, and discretionary, where the judge takes into account whether or not it's fair to evict the tenant. So, for instance, if the tenant owes some arrears, say just a little bit of arrears, that's a discretionary ground, and the judge will decide whether or not the tenant goes. Whereas a mandatory ground, there's a new one, which is that if the tenant is in arrears, that if the arrears have amounted to 2 months or more on 3 separate occasions in 3 years, then, so they're quite serious arrears, then the landlord can get possession as a mandatory ground, which means the judge doesn't take into account whether or not it's reasonable. So this is what a lot of the hoo-ha has been about, is, and my children have had Section 21 notices, and I saw how stressed it was for them, how difficult it was, so I can.
So sorry. So I'm just going through. So because this is such a lot of information.
Sorry, so, I kind of blurred.
So the Section 1 that is going to be removed, that's a no fault eviction. So that would be, if I'm correct in thinking, I'm living in my rented accommodation. You know, I've been there for 3 years. I'm raising my family there, and for whatever reason, and again, I'm thinking from a landlord's perspective, something may have happened in circumstances, and they just want that property back, and that would be the Section 1 no fault eviction that you can do.
21, yeah. Section
so that's 21.
21. So, but the confusing thing here is, so that's a no fault eviction, which means you can do it for any reason. If you don't like the tenants, or if you if you're wanting to I don't know, for whatever reason you want to get possession. But in the Renters Reform Bill, landlords are going to be able to terminate an agreement if they want to sell, and so this is a new mandatory ground. So if a landlord wants to sell, it's it's ground 1A, which the tenant lobby are really unhappy about. So a lot of the time, the three main reasons why landlords serve Section 21 notices at the moment is, one, they want to sell, particularly because with the changes to taxation that George Osborne brought in 2015, the so-called Section 24, that if you don't own your property through a limited company, you can't set off your mortgage, or the full amount of your mortgage. And so a lot of landlords have been selling up because of that. And that's the biggest reason why landlords serve Section 21 notices. Other reasons are that the tenants are late in paying, or they've got arrears, and the landlord doesn't want to go through the hassle of the Section 8 process, which means going to court, and it's a lot more difficult doing that. And the third reason is antisocial behavior. You might have an HMO where a tenant is just not getting on with other people, and but maybe it's not that they're not doing anything that's criminal, but it's disrupting the vibe of the house. And at the moment, it's easy for a landlord to serve a Section 21 notice once they're outside of the fixed term, and then to bring in another tenant. So that's Section 21, and that's going to be phased out.
Okay, and so the whole of Section 21 is going to be removed. They're going to put in Section 1A, did you say?
No, Section 8, which is already there, and that you have grounds for possession, and there are different grounds of possession. There's, I don't know, 20 odd or something, and even more. And one of them is a new ground for possession, which is ground 1A, and that is when the landlord wants to sell up. And there are lots of different grounds. And so this is going to be a court process where people will have to go to court and prove to the judge that they're wanting to sell up or whatever. Whereas at the moment with Section 21, you don't have to prove anything, and you just serve the notice.
But then, did I hear in your podcast that you said something around they wouldn't want to remove Section 21 and replace it with Section 8 until the court system is better? Because at the moment it can take a bit of a while.
And this is interesting. So the county court process is really slow at the moment. And there's been a lot of rhetoric from the Conservatives saying, don't worry, we're not going to bring in Section 20, the abolition of Section 21 until the county courts are until the county courts are fit for purpose. That's what the rhetoric says. But what the bill actually says is that Section 21 won't be abolished for new tenancies until the Lord Chancellor, who's the Minister, the Secretary of State for Justice, has published an assessment of the county courts. Doesn't say what the assessment's going to be. And so that means that for existing tenancies, it means that it could be a couple of years before Section 21 is abolished. But what is very interesting is the definition of existing tenancies. So this is where it gets a bit technical. If you have a fixed term tenancy now, say it's for 2 years, and after the commencement date of the bill, when it comes into effect, that tenancy becomes periodic. then that will convert to the new system. So it can be an existing tenancy, and you could say next July be subject to the new rules, even though it's existing tenancy. For new tenancies, the rules are going to apply straight away. So it really is likely that only existing periodic tenancies are going to be under the old rules, because all the fixed terms that are normally for a year will soon expire. But that's how it is at the moment, and the rules might change, because to me it does seem to be very unfair that you would have different rules depending on whether your tenancy's gone periodic before the bill comes into force, or whether it becomes periodic a day later, and then it's counted as a new tenancy, even though it's an old tenancy. I mean, it's complicated.
So might people start, and maybe I'm understanding this wrong, but might landlords start giving out, 5-year tenancies or 7-year tenancies?
Yeah, they might do, or they might just decide to put them on. Is say that we have tenancies that are expiring in the next couple of weeks. Fixed term tenancies is just letting them go on to periodic, because that way they will, at the moment as the bill is drafted, they will stay under the old rules for as long as possible. But yes,
how and what's the difference between periodic and rolling? Periodic and the fixed term.
Yeah. So why landlords like fixed term contracts is because you know that they're going to be there for that amount of time, a year, 6 months, whatever. And letting agents like it because when you get to the end of the fixed term, they can charge money for a renewal. But if you do nothing with that fixed term, when it expires, it automatically by law will turn into what's called a periodic tenancy. So that's a rolling monthly contract normally, unless you enter into a new fixed term tenancy with the tenants. So once the Renters Reform Bill comes in, when that initial fixed term ends, you won't be able to enter into another fixed term, and it will become periodic and then under the new rules. So, I mean, what happens at the moment is when I first find tenants, I sign them up for a year as a fixed term, and then at the end of the year, I let them decide whether or not to go onto another year contract. If they want to, they might want to have the reassurance that they're there for another year, or I let them go periodic. Some of them like to go periodic, and some of them like to have fixed terms. I don't really care, because they're gonna stay there anyway. And so what will happen after the bill comes into effect is that we will have no choice. Once the fixed terms expire, they will become periodic. We won't be able to have periodic tenancies, and they'll all be periodic then.
So can we start now with a periodic? So if I've got a tenant,
you can start with a periodic now, but it does tend to be, it's unusual, because people normally want to have tenants for a whole year, because then they get their costs back and they know that they're not going to have to try and find another one. But as for me, I'm not going to worry about being part of the new rules. I'm really not worried about the Renters Reform Bill. I think there's been huge amount of fuss, and then in a couple of years' time, when it's all bedded down, people will wonder what the fuss is about. And what will be difficult for landlords is those who aren't careful about tenant selection. So as long as you get good tenants in there, it's fine, because landlords want tenants to be in there for a long time. They don't like people chopping and changing, but it is going to be a change, and people don't like change. They can't see they can't see the merit of it. I mean, I can, because my kids are renters, and I see the world through their eyes as well as through mine.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I suppose the always the worry in the back of one's head is, people's circumstances can change, can't they? And so somebody who has been a fantastic tenant for a while, something can happen, and then suddenly things can go awry. So I suppose that would be the scary scenario from that perspective. But I suppose if they become awry and they fit into these these criteria that you were talking about, having, let's say, 2 months in arrears over an X number of period, then there will be something in place, as long as the courts are working, to be able to do this. I suppose it just seems a little bit complex, but as it all comes through, it will become clearer, won't it, I suppose?
Yeah,
Fantastic. So I have just a question for you as well. So, and I know it was spoken about a lot in the past, but this right to rent situation, would you mind sharing a bit of information on that one, please?
Right to rent. Sorry.
Right to rent.
I don't.
So I think it's around if people come from abroad or they live abroad.
Oh, sorry, I completely. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. No, my head was that. Yes. So if somebody comes from abroad, they have to have the right to rent, which means that they have to have their immigration status means that they're allowed to rent in the UK. And so if you're British or Irish, it's easy. You just check their passport, take a copy of it, if they come from abroad, then they have a share code, and you put that on the government website, and you need to take a copy of it and make sure they have the right to rent. Do not let to anybody who does not have the right to rent, because you can be fined £10,000 if you allow somebody in to rent a property from you and they don't have the right to rent. And I don't know where I got.
Okay, so it's a share code, and where do you find this share code?
The tenant will give it to you, and you can look at their documents as well. It's a complicated area, and if you go onto my website, theindependentlandlord.com, and you put right to rent in the search bar, you'll find the answers in there.
Amazing. No, that's absolutely fantastic. And then I was going to close with a final question that has now completely slipped my mind. What was that? Oh, it's around oh gosh. So just as an overall sort of moving forward, do you think that there's do you think there's going to be sort of a big change around in sort of the letting agents? Because generally I would imagine, I mean, certainly I was, before I kind of understood you and started hearing about you, it was kind of like, gosh, I just really want to hand that over. Do you think this kind of sort of push of will make more changes around the letting agents and what they have to offer, and them having to be accredited in some way or another? Do you think this is going to potentially push it a better thing?
I mean, a report was done about 5 years ago by someone called Lord Best, recommending that letting agents should be regulated. It's going to be interesting to see if that appears in the manifestos of Labour and of the Conservatives for the election. Letting agents are seeing the Renters Reform Bill as a business opportunity for them, because it's going to be complicated, and landlords, need to have somewhere trusted to go to get advice. And this is what, when I've been listening to podcasts after listening to the letting agents ones, and they're saying, yes, it's money time. We're going to, but then it's going to be difficult for letting agents, because there's going to be no more fixed term contracts, which means no more annual renewals, although you'll still be wanting to review the rent once a year, and the Renters Reform Bill will change that slightly going forward. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of scaremongering, because fear does drive business growth. But I'm kind of a little bit of a lone voice out there saying, don't worry about it. Just do your homework. It's not that complicated. And become accredited landlords. You can do it yourself. You just need to take it seriously. It's not passive income. Get organized. Make sure you put in your calendar when all your various certificates are going to run out. There's property management software that you can use as well. I personally don't. I just use spreadsheets and calendars, which I think Richard, well, he has this, Richard Jackson, he has this big Alpha Lets thing, but I'm quite happy just relying on my calendar. But certainly if you've got a few more properties than probably I have, that kind of thing's useful. But you just need to be organized, and it'll be fine. And the interesting thing is probably the Renters Reform Bill is probably a business opportunity for landlords, because the more landlords that leave, and there will be a lot that leave, the more demand there's going to be. And for those of us that manage to ride the wave and don't fall off the surfboard, we should be fine. So I'm very optimistic about it.
Amazing. Well, I love that. I absolutely love that. Right. So this is an opportunity. I know we've mentioned it, but it'd be really great to sort of, again, share where people can find you. And obviously, if anyone wants to come into your Facebook group, I think you said, that's presumably the place, so they can go to your website, which you'll tell us, and find the information. But then if you've got any questions, they can come into the Facebook page. And then again, if they want to listen to not just information, but also potentially up-to-date information, then that would be in the podcast. Is that correct?
Yes. So the main place to go to is theindependentlandlord.com. Subscribe to my weekly newsletter because that has links to all the new content and what's going on. So that's theindependentlandlord.com. If you're on Instagram, I'm indie_landlord. The Good Landlording podcast is goodlandlording.com. And you've got really detailed show notes in there and links to all the podcast apps. It's on all the apps. So, go into Spotify and put Good Landlording in. and if you put into Google Landlord Advice Podcast, we're number 1 at the moment with a featured snippet, which isn't bad. We got 6 weeks going. So yeah, they're the main places that you can find us. And on there's a link to the Facebook group on my website. But if you search the Independent Landlord Community on Facebook, it should come up.
Amazing.
Landlords only.
No, I love that. And it's really nice, I think, as we started off with, a lot of kind of being a landlord had so many negative connotations, the whole NRLA. I do believe they being in that kind of room makes it very negative. And so it's such a breath of fresh air for you to be sharing. And this is a lot of valuable time. You do it for free. It's really, really generous. I think it's an incredible resource to add there. So, I want to thank you myself, because you've definitely had an impact on me. And I'm really excited now, actually, to offer what I consider to be a great opportunity for someone to come and rent and then buy my particular property. So I think it's absolutely great. So thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining us. Would you like to have any kind of closing words before we sign off?
If you're not sure what to do as a landlord, just do the right thing. Think about how you would explain it to a teenage child who's a bit anti-landlord, and whether or not how it would land with them. Just do the right thing, and that will get you there 90% of the time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. It's been so great talking to you, and I look forward to next week. I believe it's a bank holiday, isn't it? So we're not going to be here next week, but I shall be here the following week. I'll have to look up who's coming because I've forgotten. But brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. And I really look forward to continuing to listen and learn from your podcasts. And I'm going to, really enjoy being a official landlord shortly. So,
Good luck.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. Take care.